Welcome back to Indie Author Blueprint. I'm Michelle Rayburn, and today we're talking about one of the biggest pivot points in indie publishing, deciding how much editing your book truly needs. Every author faces this crossroads, and for many indie authors, especially first-timers, the temptation is strong to do less editing or skip editing altogether because they feel confident in their writing skills. Maybe they've won writing contests. Maybe they've taught English. Maybe they've been journaling or blogging for 20 years, and those are real strengths, and they are actually great writers. But publishing is a different world with different expectations. And even as somebody who has edited many, many books for other authors, I still hire an editor. I need my work to be edited. There are things that I miss. And even though I'm up on the publishing standards and I feel like the Chicago Manual of Style is my best friend sitting on my desk when I'm working, I still need an editor. And today I want to walk gently because honestly, that gap between confidence and reality is really hard to navigate sometimes. And I want to give you tools to make wise professional decisions. And I don't want to destroy your confidence. I want you to understand the reasoning behind why your work needs to be edited and why it's going to make all the difference for you as an indie author. First, let's look at why smart authors sometimes underestimate editing. Indie authors often do this because they are either overconfident in their writing ability or they're undereducated about publishing standards. First, let's talk about overconfidence. Most writers have spent a lifetime getting praise for their words. Their friends say their stories are wonderful. A college professor wrote beautiful prose on their paper that they turned in. They maybe had a blog post that went viral. They've won awards for the stories and chapters. They've contributed maybe as a newspaper reporter for years. It's natural to assume that those skills translate directly to a polished manuscript. But writing a book is not the same as writing a paper or a blog post. Editing exists because even excellent writers can't see their own blind spots. We know what we meant to say, so our brain fills in the gaps that readers will trip over. Even those tense changes, going from past to present to past, I catch myself doing it all the time, and I have to tell my editor, I know I did it in here, and I'm going to need your eyes to figure that out. The other complication then is undereducation. Unless someone has worked in publishing, they simply don't know what edited actually means. They picture proofreading, they picture finding the mistakes, the typos. They're really good at finding them in the newspaper or the church bulletin or in somebody's term paper. And they're really good at spotting some of those things that, like the wrong spelling of, um, a homonym or something like that. Is that the word I'm trying to think of? Oh, off the top of my head, it doesn't always work. They're also maybe not familiar with dual spellings of something. Like people tend to use the British towards with the S on the end instead of toward, which is the American spelling. So there are things like that where, they might be really good at spotting those, but they don't picture structure, logic, pacing, clarity, reader experience, voice consistency, hopping heads, market expectations, and all of the ins and outs that come with crazy rules about commas. Editing is invisible when it's done well, and so many authors assume they don't need it. And this isn't a criticism at all. This is a knowledge gap, one that every professional learns that they have to fill. So we have to look at it and understand that there are people who geek out on understanding industry standards. And this is why, for people who have done journalism for a long time, they still need an editor for their book, especially because the rules with the Chicago Manual of Style and the Associated Press aren't even the same. How commas are handled, for example, are different. And so when you're writing for one market or the other, it's different. The capitalization on titles is different. Chicago Manual Style capitalizes some of the longer prepositions like through and about. And if you're writing with the Associated Press, it doesn't do that. So let's talk about what editing really does and why it matters. When an editor touches a manuscript, they're doing more than correcting grammar and looking for typos. A good edit will remove the muddy parts that the author doesn't notice. So there may be some things that are not clear, and maybe the editor will put a note there or explain why a word or something needs to be changed. I see so many dangling modifiers when I'm editing, and so they're funny because what comes in the beginning of the sentence doesn't actually modify what happens after. So, walking to the car, her keys dropped on the ground. Wait, the keys are the subject. The keys weren't walking to the car. Oh, while she was walking to the car, she dropped her keys. So we need to look at who's doing the action, and the dangling modifier walking to the car, comma, her keys dropped on the ground doesn't work. So that's an example of something an editor's going to notice that as the author we probably don't even notice. I catch myself doing those things all the time. I can see them in other people's work, just not in my own. Your editor should be helping strengthen the pacing and the structure, looking at redundancies. You probably have pet words and you don't realize you used it 12 times in that one paragraph. The editor is going to point out that you need to have a different word, a synonym, or something else, or figuring out how to restructure this to get rid of the need to repeat she over and over, those kinds of things. The editor clarifies the what the character is doing, and so you might maybe in your dialogue, it's hard to tell who's speaking or who did what. They're looking at that, they're looking at consistency and flow. They're protecting your credibility by checking all of your resources and telling you, "Ah, you have a missing resource here. I know that didn't come out of your brain." So they're actually looking to make sure when you quoted somebody else's material or you quoted the Bible, that all of that is consistent. They're looking at every reference, they're checking to make sure you got the year and the page number right on the things you quote or the Bible reference, all of that. The editing then brings your book up to the industry standards, and readers don't even consciously know it exists. They just feel it. Like they can read a book and know something feels amateur about it, but they don't know the standards either. They just know something feels off. And so if you don't know it feels off, but it is off, your readers are going to notice it too. Indie authors then all often will blame their sales on marketing or their book cover or, whatever else is going on. But you have to look at readability too. And so if you skipped editing altogether, that is the first place to begin when you're struggling with sales. And then secondly, the other things. Now, how do you know what level of editing you need? I know I've covered this in some other episodes and I have some other resources as well, but this is where authors struggle because in traditional publishing, there's so much editing. And obviously, most indie authors don't have $20,000 to spend on hiring somebody to first go over and do major edits with them on content and then go over and do some structural things and then the grammar and then the final proof. They just don't have that, which is why you see people either skip it or they rely on volunteers who don't know the industry standards at all as well. So first, have you had professional feedback before? Have you ever been through an editor before, or have you only had beta readers? Like, friends reading it. If you've had professional editing before and they did a lot, they made a lot of changes, they corrected a lot of things, and I know it was better. Okay, if they did a lot, you're going to need editing, number one. And if they did a lot, you're going to need to find somebody who is able to do more than just a proofread. They're not just looking at that final proofread. You're going to need somebody who actually knows how to make corrections. If you're writing in a genre that depends on pacing and structure, like fiction, especially, or narrative nonfiction, where you want, they're building up suspense, there's plot and there's a structure and everything, you might need developmental editing. Now, some of that can happen in a critique group that you're part of. There's a lot of people who write fiction who are part of groups who know a lot. And so that is where other professionals sometimes provide input for one another on the developmental end. But that is something to keep in mind that you might be needing to hire somebody. I would need that, I think, right now if I started writing fiction because that is not I don't write fiction. I write nonfiction. So I would know I'd need some extra coaching there. Another thing to ask yourself is this my first book? If it's your first book, first-time authors almost always underestimate how much editing will improve their work. So, if your first book and you're thinking you can skip the editing, I would say you probably can't. How much revising have you done on your own? Like, have you gone through just one draft and you've used a spell checker, or have you done rounds and rounds and rounds of working on it yourself and looking for things? Then that will help you determine how much editing you need. And then you're going to want to have some input. Maybe you want to send a sample chapter to an editor and ask them to look at it first, do a sample edit, and then give you a bid. And then that will help you to determine. They might tell you, oh, this will go through their normal copy editing process and be fine. Or, wow, you really need some extra help that I don't offer, but here's who I recommend. And then it'll be ready to come to the copy editor. So that's just some ways that you can determine that. Now, the challenge then is how do I reframe my mindset around editing if I'm resistant to the idea that I need an editor? And I want to gently challenge that belief, that thought that I'm a great writer, so I don't need much editing. Being a strong writer doesn't eliminate the need for editing. It increases the value of our product when we have editing. So, the better the writer, the more nuance there is for an editor to refine. Here's the thing that happens. If I get a really difficult edit, I get something that needs a lot of work. It means that there's just only so much I can fix in it. There are some times where I'm like, I'm just going to have to let some of this go because I can't correct all of this, like misspellings or punctuation issues and tense and point of view while also helping to improve the tone and the flow. It's like I don't want the writer to perceive I'm trying to rewrite their book because that's one of the struggles with something that needs a lot of work. It becomes like a book doctoring, like I'm rewriting. If somebody comes to me and I have some clients who are fantastic writers who don't need a ton of editing, like they could put it out there and most people probably wouldn't even notice some of the mistakes that are there. They're not that big of a deal. But that's when I can see like that repetition of words or some of those subtle things where it's like, wait, didn't this happen in chapter whatever? And wasn't the name of the character different in that chapter? I can see those things and catch them because there's not so much other clutter happening. So if you're an excellent writer, it just gives your editor a little more space to make it even greater. So the mindset shift then that we have to do is maybe instead of saying I don't need editing, I change that to, I want my book to be its best version. Or if the mindset is, I can fix this myself, then I say, I can't see everything because I'm too close to it. Or instead of editing is optional, the mindset is editing is part of publishing. Professional editors, hiring somebody is not a admission of weakness. It's just a demonstration that you want to treat your book professionally. You want to treat your publishing project professionally. And so that's why it's important. It's just part of the publishing process. Now, you have to make some decisions on then what that whole editing process is going to look like because you're probably not going to have 6 rounds like traditional publishing would or more. I'm just starting with the basics of what happens in that process. So, let's look at a simple decision framework. Let's look at 3 steps that help you decide how much editing is enough. First, start with a sample edit. Most editors will do 1 or 2 pages for free or a small fee. I'll do like 1 chapter if it's not very many pages. If it's 15 pages, I might do 10, at the most. If I get into the first 5 pages and I realize it's heavy editing, then I will stop there and send it to the author just to give them an idea of what it needs. And if you get some of that input, use that as a way of going back through the manuscript to make some of those changes. Don't just take the feedback and go, "Okay," and then not learn from it. So you want to use that as a way of looking at, "Oh, I see. I do this often." This will help improve your writing as well. The second thing that you want to do is compare the sample edit you get from the editor with your expectations. Does the edit feel heavier than you thought it was going to be? That's normal. It's revealing. It shows something about ourselves. And it's hard because you expect that you're going to get an A on the paper and then there's all these marks. And I have to remind myself this is not school. This is not grading. This is not critiquing or encouraging, like somebody giving me feedback. This is an editor. They are fixing stuff. I am going to see stuff on the page that is fixed. So it's looking at that though and seeing what did they fix and comparing it to my expectations. Did I expect that there would be nothing to fix here? So that's going to tell me, okay, listening to my input here, I might need more editing than I thought. And then match the edit to your publishing goals. Finally, third thing. If you want a professional book and you want it to compete in the market, your editing has to match that level. If your book is for friends and family, you might want a very quick proofread. If you plan to sell 30 copies and or give them out at Christmas to family and friends, that is not the same as somebody who is setting up a business and wanting to publish multiple books and they want to compete in the marketplace. Your editing has to rise up to whatever level you are trying to achieve with those publishing goals. So we take all of this and let's think about an actionable step for today. Take a look at a section of your manuscript. Take the one that you think is the strongest and show it to someone who isn't like a close friend. Somebody who doesn't love you so much that they want to protect your feelings, okay? So that means ask for some tough beta readers or, reach out to one person who could be tough. Ask them, were there places where you stumbled or got confused or felt distracted? So give that section, not the whole thing. Don't overwhelm people. And then take that input that you get. If they highlight things you never noticed, it's a sign that the book will benefit from more editing than you thought. And when you reach out to those people, you can tell them, I'm just looking for story feedback first. Maybe you want them to give you input on the flow. So it might be like, does it make sense? And that's the did you stumble or get confused or feel distracted? But the other thing is, you might want to reach out to them and say, Does this have a feel of being professional writing to you, or does it have a feel that it needs editing?" Ask them specifically what you're looking for. Some of them might even send you a list of some corrections they saw. Remember, as you're seeking this and as you're taking this step of planning out your editing process, editing is not punishment, and I know it feels that way. It really feels sometimes like this is just some way like shredding me. And it's hard because um a lot of editors are just matter of fact because they are trying to make your book better. They're not thinking about your ego right now. They're thinking about the outcome. And so this is stewardship. This is really honoring the reader by delivering the clearest and strongest and most compelling version of your message or your story that you can. And so it's part of the privilege of publishing. This is not a burden that you're carrying, but it's part of the privilege of being able to put that out there. And something that I see when I'm just hopping around on the internet and just seeing posts from indie authors, people considering publishing books. And I've seen some who have said, my book manuscript is almost written. They've been putting together some pieces of it. And they might say, I'm thinking about publishing it next month. And I'm thinking to myself, where are they getting all these things done? Like they're just finishing their writing and they must be planning to do the cover themselves and the formatting, but they're jumping from writing to formatting. And I will comment sometimes if they ask for input, like, does that sound realistic? I often will say, no, it doesn't, because your editor's going to need a few weeks and then you're going to need some weeks to review what they worked on. And you might need a second level of editing or proofreading. And sometimes it just goes silent. Like, I think they block my comments. And people don't want to see and understand the role of editing, and they wanna skip over it. I want to encourage you to evaluate that again. I was gonna say second guess. That's not the word I think I was looking for. Look at it again. Look at it to see, am I being unrealistic because I wanna get this book out there? And do I need to change my mindset about whether or not this book actually needs editing? One of the number one things, I've said this many times before on Indie Author Blueprint, that I can pick up an indie published book and know that it wasn't edited or it was not done well, is if there are no footnotes in the whole book. This is for nonfiction. Fiction, different story. Nonfiction books with no footnotes where they're, like, researching or examining a topic and writing about it, and if you're gonna go through the editing phase, you're going to have somebody who says, "Wait, where did you get this from?" So be diligent. Be diligent about doing that editing. If you're a fiction author, be diligent about the editing too, because I have read some fantastic indie published books and loved it. And I know it's because they did a really great job with getting somebody to edit their work. All right, I'm on a soapbox right now, so I think it's time to get off the box. Time for you to go and do some editing and look for a person who's going to be your partner in publishing with that. Indie Author Blueprint is on Substack. There are some resources there. I have some checklists and things for paid subscribers that help you with some of this editing process and what you need to look for. So go ahead and get those tools or sign up to be a paid subscriber for only $8 a month. And then you can get those tools and you get all the ones that have existed in all the posts before. So if it came out when Indie Author Blueprint started, that resource is available to you when you subscribe now. So just putting that out there if you're looking for extra help. All right, thanks for listening today and happy editing to you.